Hey, you guys, thanks for listening in on this episode of today. I have of Tips with Tea. I have Miss Ean with us. Hey, Miss Ean, how are you doing today?
Hello. Good. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today. So, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Well, I am what's called a profit first bookkeeper. And what that means is I do bookkeeping assistance for small businesses using the profit first cash management method. So that's a super simple system that lets them know exactly what's happening without having to have a degree in accounting.
Awesome, awesome. I know me and you we had chatted before, and you were telling me about your background and how you had went through bankruptcy. So, how was you able to bounce back from that?
I think the reason I was able to bounce back was because I addressed the underlying issue.
Mm-hmm.
There was really more than one.
Mm-hmm.
The primary underlying issue was, I don't know if there's a primary one of them, I'll say. One of the underlying issues was that I was just what I consider to be financially illiterate, right? My family grew up kind of middle class. We had enough, but not too much. So, definitely everyone was careful around money, but we never talked about it.
Yes.
And it was always a like, well, let's see if we can do that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just didn't know how to read any of the warning signs that were around me.
Mm-hmm.
I just sort of went off of this is sort of problem number two. I went off of the quote unquote good advice that I was getting, things that sound like work hard and you'll succeed, follow your passion and the money will come. And it's kind of BS, right? It does not address the realities around us. And it sort of falsely puts all of the responsibility on our shoulders
Mm-hmm.
instead of putting an appropriate amount on our shoulders. And so the third deep issue in that, which is also related to the fourth issue, was that I was just under earning. And I had no idea because I was working my butt off.
Mm-hmm.
And so, this whole like work hard and you'll do okay. Like, I don't know that I could have worked any harder. I was working
Mm-hmm.
multiple jobs and, trying to balance everything. And I was spending next to nothing. Um, at the time I filed for bankruptcy, I was in a 4-bedroom apartment with 7 roommates.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it wasn't that I was overspending, but I was working for a woman as her office manager. I'd been originally hired to be the receptionist and then had kind of grown into an office management position and ended up buying a computer and learning bookkeeping and, negotiating contracts for her and helping her schedule her staff. And I was getting paid $9 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally came to her and said, I feel like people that do what I do are called office managers. And I feel like they usually earn somewhere between like $15 and $25 an hour. What would you think of giving me a raise to 10? And she said, how about I give you a raise to 9.25? So thankfully,
Mm-hmm.
I think, I think I would have been okay with that, which is shockingly sad.
Yeah.
That this idea that we just don't know
Mm-hmm.
um, what it's okay to ask for, or that even when we do ask for it, I at least, again, didn't have the financial literacy to be like, well, if that's really true, then I can get the same job somewhere else because now I have experience.
Right.
But there was something about me not really understanding how money worked and therefore feeling like, well, if I'm working this hard and not succeeding, and if the person who's employing me doesn't feel like I'm providing value above $9.25, maybe I'm not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I'm so thankful for my bankruptcy for a number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
One of which that it happened in my early 20s when I had time to correct and fix and get back on track.
Mm-hmm.
But number two is because it was the universe slapping me in the face and saying, you cannot tolerate this. Like, you have to listen to that voice inside of you that says someone with your skills should be getting 25 an hour and
Mm-hmm.
go do. And so I ended up leaving that job on pretty friendly terms. Thankfully, we just couldn't come to an agreement about how much I should get paid. And so she allowed me to contact her network of people who were designers and artisans and craftspeople. And I started doing just bookkeeping for them, at that 25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what transformed it. That was how I got out of it, was being in charge of my own income
Mm-hmm.
so I could set my own prices and just relentlessly pursuing knowledge and understanding, which is slightly different, around how money stuff works and how money mindset stuff works.
And that's great, because I think this pandemic has also opened our eyes to show the economy and how we have a lot of people that are working for minimum wage, and they are overworking, underpaid, and how can these particular people get to actually live a comfortable life if the cost of living is high and their pay is less. So we are having it's like now it's like kind of like a struggle within our economy, because people are starting to realize, hey, I'm worth more, I have more value, I can go somewhere else. And that's why a lot of different industries now are struggling, especially like in the restaurant industry and the hospitality industry, healthcare, because a lot of people are switching gears and switching to whole totally different professions because of that same thing that you just spoke of, which I was just like, I've been seeing it for years, and I was just working a job saying, okay, I'm just gonna work this job until I get to this point, and then I'm gonna quit. And then when the pandemic came, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this is my chance to just go ahead and say, okay, no, I need to go ahead and focus on what my business full time. And thankfully, I already had my business established, and like a lot of people now too are starting businesses because of this, because they know their worth, they know their value, and they want to be able to set their own rates instead of getting paid, like you say, $7.25 an hour, $9.25 an hour, which is really kind of like a slap in the face, especially when you've been doing it for a while.
Absolutely, right? But I think, again, so many of us have not been allowed to believe that we can charge our own, our own price, because the large corporations won't support that. And again, in some ways, although it's been really terrible for a lot of people for a long time, this slow eroding of wages, the slow eroding of benefits, the slow eroding of security, I think the pandemic, again, was kind of a big wake-up call for a bunch of people to be like, wow, I've really been tolerating a loss that's not okay. And that this idea that we have to have, quote unquote, a college degree or even a high school degree in order to make money. Like, no, you don't. No, you don't. It helps in certain industries, but depending on what you do, I believe that most people will find the most satisfaction working in and for their local community, solving the problems of the people who they really enjoy spending time with and are likely spending time with already, and really, solving a need that community of yours has, and finding out a way to exchange that value for money.
Awesome. So I guess what tips will you give us to kind of like help us to avoid bankruptcy, or to identify those red flags, or, that we should be able to identify, but, some of us will not be able to. So what are some things that you would suggest?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest, easiest one is you should be able to, and I use the word should very intentionally, and sorry, you should be able to set aside something into a savings account every month. If you can't set aside at least 5% of your income into a savings account, and if you can't allow that savings account to build to be an emergency fund of 3, 6, 12 months, then you're not earning enough to really survive on. And again, I think a lot of people who work sort of low wage jobs know that, and they have these side hustles that they start. And so, to be really clear about what is it that my job provides me, and oftentimes it is benefits, that I am not going to get as easily if I turn my side money into a full-time thing. And I think, there is a feeling of stability and security in a job versus a business, but it can be a false sense of security if you're not earning enough.
And then the thing too is, like, now we realize that there's really no job security no more. A pandemic can come and take your job.
Right.
They could start furloughing at any time. So, I mean,
yes, right. I mean, and that, I had that same experience in 2008 when there was that recession, where I actually had a woman that I went to church with, and she had been, I can't remember where she worked, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, one of those big ones. And she was a singer. That was what she loved to do. And she had set aside her artistic dreams to go work for this major corporation for stability. And then in the financial crisis, right, they just kind of dropped her, lost all of the money in her pension. And she was like, I just wasted the last 20 years. Like, I would have been in the exact same place if I had been singing this whole time. So, so I think that it is important to realize, like, when you're dependent on something external from yourself, to just be really clear about why and what if. Because it doesn't, there's no wrong choice, unless it's a choice that makes you so miserable that you're sick. And there's plenty of creative ways to mix and match and do whatever you need to do to move forward, including getting the information, the knowledge, and the understanding of the pieces that are holding you back. So if you don't understand money stuff, listening to a podcast is a great way, especially if you've got a long commute, great way to like get that information. If you like to listen to audiobooks or read books or read the paper, whatever it is. And that's a little hard because there's this information overwhelm, right? And the experts all love to say something provocative and opposite of what everyone else is saying to sell books, which as a consumer is really confusing. Like, well, I was doing this and I shouldn't, like, what? So finding a mentor can really help. SCORE, the Small Business Association, SBA, have free mentors. Always check things against your gut. My experience with SCORE is that a lot of times it's sort of retired professionals who have worked in corporate situations, and corporate is so different than small business. And so being able to say, does this advice line up with my intuition and paying attention? And because if something doesn't feel right to you, doesn't matter if that's the sort of expert opinion, because there's more than one way to do something.
Right. So you also teach your clients how to be comfortable with power and with money. So explain that. How can we feel with power and with money?
So, and this is really just about, my own personal journey towards this, that, my mother grew up in a economically depressed area of California, Bakersfield, California, in the 40s and 50s. And, she didn't have a lot, and she really brought that sort of depression era mentality forward into our family. And so there were a lot of, judgments around money stuff. And it was very funny because she, as on her path to like escape, where she was super motivated by her, her stepfather, who was not a super great guy at all. She was really motivated to like get out and do well. And so she made sure that she could go to college, and then married my dad and got support that way, which was really important. And decided when I was, I don't know, a year or so old, that she was actually going to go to medical school, which is brutal, right? Thankfully, she's really smart. I don't know that I could do it, especially not with 2 kids, but she did. And we see these sorts of stories all the time, that people who are really clear on what they're doing and why they're doing it are more likely to be able to tap into the network of support that they need in order to get it done. Nobody does it on their own. Nobody. And so I actually was raised in student housing on Stanford campus. So she had a lot of fear that I was going to take things for granted. She had a lot of fear that I was going to be kind of a snotty rich girl. And she reminded me often, where I came from, and not to get too big for my britches. And I think that's a message that a lot of us hear in different ways. Whatever level our family is at, or whatever culture we have, there's this call to honor where we came from. And sometimes that call, which I absolutely agree with, gets mixed in with fear, jealousy, concern, all of these things. And so, being able to just sit with the discomfort that we often feel about, if I do this, am I betraying my family, my values, my culture, and making those decisions for yourself about, no, I think I can really move forward and be a powerful, independent, successful person, and still, honor where I came from and where I'm going. And that looks different for different people. One of the things that I often suggest to people who are kind of middle class and stuck around this is, if you can be making a whole lot more money and you don't want to because you don't need it, like, that's not enough. It's not enough that you don't need it. Your community needs it. So go make that money. Don't hold back. Shine your light as bright as you can, right? And just because you earn it doesn't mean you have to keep it. You can decide, I'm going to, fund a local initiative, or donate to a school so they can offer scholarships, or buy them supplies, or whatever it is. And that knowing that by taking good care of ourselves, we actually are taking good care of our families and our communities, right? Like we were talking earlier about that house on Myrtle Beach, right? This is not a selfish thing of me showing off. Me having a beautiful home in a place where people want to visit allows me to feel good about expanding my heart, and allows me to feel good about the power that I now wield, the privilege that I now have with the money that I've got, in a way that supports what I want to do with life, that supports my spirituality, that supports my personal forward growth, and that supports, my family's growth if they want to come along. Otherwise, they can come and, talk about how nice my house is, and whatever, like, call me too big for my britches. I don't care. We're still eating dinner together, and to support the community. And to me, that's what business should be about. So that's kind of the emotional discussions around, like, how do you feel about money? And sometimes it's as simple as filling in the sentence, rich people are blank. And like, what's the first word you go to? It's not wrong, but why? Like, what is it about your journey that leads you to that conclusion? And what if the opposite were true? And can we find evidence for that?
Awesome. I'm glad you said all that, because, just being comfortable with money and realizing it's okay to have money. It's okay to be able to manage money. It's okay to have, power, business, and money. It's just how you all manage it, maintain it, and how do you use it to help serve others. And I think, like that, what you said, by giving back to our community. So I'm glad you broke it down.
Yeah. So there's a fantastic book, like I said, the system that I teach is called Profit First, and it's based on a book written by a guy named Mike McCallow. It's called Profit First. And one of the things that I really love about Mike is that he's a very generous person. And so those of us that are Profit First professionals have the opportunity to license the book and write our own version of it. So there's a Profit First for dentists and a Profit First for real estate people. And one of my peers is a woman named Suzanne Mariga, who's based in Texas. And she just wrote Profit First for minority business enterprises. And I think it's better than the original. And the reason I think it's better than the original is because it has the same system in it, but it has so much more of this mindset, right? She was the first person in her family to go to college. That wasn't my story, but I so identified with so many of those cultural things of, like, how do you negotiate a family that has trouble around money? How do you begin to find your own path in that? And, so much of the mindset stuff that we're told comes from people who have not really deeply examined their own privilege. And so this idea of, like, think it in it, it will become, doesn't address the neurobiology of how our brains work, which is, if it's not safe to have money, my brain is never going to let me have money. I can do all the, like, visualizing and praying and meditating and vision boards that I want. I have to address that underlying place of, why isn't it safe for me to stand up to my parents
Mhm.
or my, family or community or boss or whoever that person is, maybe sometimes all of them, and to identify like, yeah, that really, when I lived in someone else's home, it really wasn't safe to express a
Mhm.
counter opinion, right? I really couldn't tell you, like, I'm going to go do my own thing without serious consequences. But now that we're adults, that may have changed. And so let's spend some time trying to, again, find the evidence to satisfy our brain's need to be able to move in that direction.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Miss Ean, for being on the show today. I highly appreciate you. So I'm going to share the social media handles so you can tell our listeners how they can get in contact with you.
Yep. I mean, I think the easiest thing is just to go to our website, which is moxiebookkeeping.com, which is, I think, maybe one of the only links that's not up there. But of course, as you can see here, we're on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and all the places you would normally find a business. So, we're happy to have more of these discussions with anyone and talk about if we can help you or not.
Awesome. And if you guys want to get in contact with me, you can do so. My number is 910-317-0396. You can shoot me an email at contact@mjfinancial.biz. You can schedule a consultation on the website at www.mjfinancial.biz. You can find this episode on Anchor, you guys, and you can also find the playback for this video on the YouTube channel for M&J Financial Management as well. So thank you once again, Ms. Ean, for being on the show. I highly appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
And all right, you guys, we will see you on the next episode of Tips with T.